When the TikTok phenomenon MomTok suddenly turned into a reality show called The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, everyone was so curious about what these beautiful, young, impressionable women were constantly fighting about. And why do they all have such long extensions? Well, what if I told you that one of the reasons Mormon women are expected to have long hair is so that they can wash their husband's feet? Yeah. Yeah. Not for me. I don't even want to touch my husband's feet. The message that is constantly being ingrained in the women from the pulpit is you're not just raising children, you're raising eternal souls. Talk about pressure. For generations of Mormon girls and women, faith has not simply been a belief system, it's been an identity, a destiny, and in many cases, a lifelong contract of obedience. And in the world of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Hulu's docuseries following MomTok, the camera pans across perfectly curated Instagram homes, matching family outfits, and cheerful, choreographed dances. But behind the soft smiles and filtered images lies something much more complex. A world shaped by meticulous religious rules, rules that dictate how a woman should look, behave, speak, marry, parent, and even think. When some of those MomTok stars were exposed for participating in so-called soft swinging, the media frenzy focused on sex and scandal. But the more urgent story may be this. What compels devout women raised in one of America's most rule-bound faiths, or cults, to break away so dramatically? And what does that say about the system that they came from? Today, we are going to unpack all of the weird rules that Mormon women are supposed to abide by and discuss whether or not the women of MomTok are doing really anything to fight that patriarch. So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so excited to have so many new faces here, new screen names here. Thank you so much for your support on my channel, and I hope you like this new video. Now, a little bit about me. I'm fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices, and I typically post a cult deep dive every week and might add in some other videos about topics that are just interesting to me or I find problematic and might need to be discussed. Now, what I don't talk about a lot, because I want you guys to think I'm smart, is one of my guiltiest pleasures is reality television. And I have totally gotten pulled into The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I've covered Mormonism on this channel a couple of times. I've covered FLDS, and I hate to admit, I've watched this series a couple of times all the way through just because I'm trying to wrap my head around A, why it's so fascinating, and B, why it feels like the women are sometimes misguided in their approach to, smash the patriarchy, but also constantly attack each other, but also uplift each other, but also judge each other. So I just thought it would be fun to really, really unpack what are the rules that these women are trying to break free from? And are these conventionally beautiful young mothers kind of setting a strange expectation among other women who watch this content when it comes to tradwife culture and Mormon culture? Are they really doing anything that's super, super helpful to women as a whole? Now, I know that that's kind of like an inflammatory statement, but I think that when you watch a show with women that are breaking free from a religious construct that has oppressed women for decades. You're thinking, this is incredible, this is great. But then when you see how they treat each other sometimes, you're like, hold on. I think that the internalized misogyny is running like through your veins. So we're just going to unpack all of it and try to understand a little bit more about where these women are coming from through a both critical and compassionate lens. Now, it's early. I might need to sip on a coffee from my new Let the Fresh Air in mug. I always think that influencer merch, I don't even think I'm an influencer, is a little bit cringy, but my husband made this for me and told me to share about it, and I think it's cute. So if you want one, let me know, and maybe I'll post a link to buy them. Cheers. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it.
Have you talked to your bishop or the church about anything?
No.
No? How come?
I don't know, because, like, what if they're going to, like, excommunicate me?
Hey, when you are out soft swinging, what do you expect?
It's just what's frustrating is that you didn't confront me first. And I feel like now you're, like, notorious for doing this for a lot of people, like calling Taylor white trash. When Whitney told me that Demi said I was too Mormon for her, she also told me that Demi called Taylor white trash.
Demi called Taylor white trash.
I would have felt uncomfortable. He's like, her bra, her tits are right there. Like,
That's
it's uncomfortable.
a him problem.
This is what you're gonna be painting. I want you to put creativity, passion. I want you to pretend that you are Michelangelo, okay? MomTok is all about sisterhood and femininity, and I thought it would be really fun to have a party that really leaned into that.
It's a vagina.
So, as I'm sure you can guess, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS, widely known as the Mormon Church, reacted very defensively to the secret lives of Mormon wives and distanced faithful women's real lives from MomTok's salacious drama. Now, in an official statement ahead of the series, church leaders complained that entertainment portrayals often rely on gross misrepresentations, noting that some recent productions depict lifestyles and practices blatantly inconsistent with the teachings of the church, unquote. And indeed, soft swinging does violate core Mormon teachings. LDS doctrine declares that sexual relations belong only within marriage between husband and wife. The MomTok influencer's behavior of swapping partners and breaching marital vows is far outside the bounds for observant Latter-day Saints. The LDS Church emphasized that the Mormon wives cast are outliers and not representative of the millions of Latter-day Saint women who live their faith virtuously, aka women who are obedient and easily controlled. Yet, with the very fascination with these secret lives come from the tension they reveal. Why would devout women raised in a faith of strict chastity and family values risk everything in a taboo scandal? And what does their story say about the pressures and rules Mormon women face? Are Mormon women empowered or stifled? How much of their lives is dictated by church rules? And what happens when a woman's personal desires conflict with those doctrines? And the answers are complex. Now, on the surface, Latter-day Saint women live happy, fulfilled lives embracing faith and family. But beneath that exterior, the mask of perfection, lies a culture of intense pressure, one that has been linked to the high rates of depression, anxiety, and even plastic surgery among Utah women. As one Utah psychiatrist observed, in Mormondom, there is a social expectation, particularly among the females, to put on a mask and say yes to everything and hide all misery and pain, unquote. He dubbed it the Mother of Zion syndrome, describing Mormon women who feel they must be perfect mothers with perfect smiles and never admit to any struggles. And that ethos is reflected in the MomTok influencer's early image, a curated world of Mormon motherhood that looked flawless on TikTok until reality broke through. Now, in order to fully understand the women's role in the Mormon Church, we need to start at the very beginning. And quickly, I just want to mention, this is my interpretation of what I have found online during my research. So if I've misunderstood, misinterpreted, miscommunicated anything, please let me know in the comments. I'm absolutely open to your feedback. I'm obviously not a Mormon, never have been, so I am looking at this from my own perspective and from a critical lens. So if I do misunderstand anything and you can offer clarity in a polite way, I'm sensitive, don't be mean, please let me know. But from my understanding, LDS girls are inculcated very early with the faith's gendered ideals and rules. The church's children organization, or primary school, teaches boys and girls together basic doctrines to love Jesus, keep the commandments, and prepare for future roles. Little girls sing upbeat songs like I Love to See the Temple, anticipating their own wedding in a holy temple one day. And the wise man built his house upon the rock, reinforcing obedience. They learn that they are daughters of heavenly parents with divine nature and a special destiny. Implicitly, they also learn that that particular destiny includes marriage and motherhood. As soon as children can talk, Mormon parents teach them to pray, to value family, and to follow church leaders. Conformity and obedience are prized virtues even for toddlers, a foundation for later adherence to rules. One pivotal child milestone is baptism at age 8. Unlike most Christian denominations, LDS baptism isn't done in infancy, but when the child is deemed old enough to discern right from wrong, the age of accountability. And if you watch Secret Lives of Mormon Lives, they love to hold each other accountable. At baptism, an 8-year-old girl makes a formal covenant to keep God's commandments as taught by the church, promising to follow Jesus Christ. She is now considered a member of the LDS Church and is expected to live by its basic standards, attending church each Sunday for 3 hours, which was just recently reduced to 2 hours, being honest and obeying the Word of Wisdom health code. So no coffee, no tea, no alcohol or tobacco. And yes, even children in Mormon families are expected to avoid Coke or iced tea at the dinner table, although you wouldn't notice with how often these ladies in MomTok just chug down a 40-ounce. Now, baptism is also when LDS kids begin yearly worthiness interviews with their bishop to ensure that they're keeping their promises. So for a young girl, this can be a very intimidating introduction to the church's scrutiny, especially considering that women cannot hold priesthood in the Mormon Church. It's all led by men. So typically the questions for a child are simple. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you obey your parents? Do you know what it means to be chaste? But even at this tender age, the expectation of chastity or no sexual sin is stated very clearly. And honestly, an 8-year-old likely doesn't even know what sex is, but she is told that her body is sacred and that she must keep God's law of chastity as she grows up. Parents and leaders reinforce modesty very early too. It is classic purity culture. Many LDS families dress even their little girls in demure clothing. Sundresses with covered shoulders, longer shorts to the knee, one-piece swimsuits instead of bikinis. So while a 5-year-old running through sprinklers in a tank top is hardly a sin, Mormon culture tends to preemptively train girls to dress appropriately. By age 10 or 11, girls often hear that showing lots of skin is immodest and displeasing to God. I mean, the stage is being set for those strict modesty standards that will formally kick in during adolescence. As one LDS mother explained, we teach our daughters early that they are precious daughters of God. Dressing modestly shows respect for themselves and God. So what starts as this simple notion of self-respect can evolve into a complex code dictating skirt lengths and sleeve coverage. It's a code that LDS girls will internalize long before they even hit puberty. Now, obedience to authority is another theme drummed in from childhood. Mormonism has a hierarchical leadership, and kids learn to recite the names of the prophet and the apostles and sing "Follow the Prophet" in primary school. Little girls watch their mothers sustain or raise a hand in agreement with male leaders during church conferences. And at home, Mormon kids typically have patriarchal family structures. The father is considered the spiritual leader who presides over the home, and the mother is his supportive partner. But we're going to touch a little bit more on that later. So a young girl sees that when her father gives a prayer or a priesthood blessing, her mother and everyone else treat that with deference. If dad says the family will move for a calling or enforce a rule, mom generally supports him. And this models to girls that men lead in church and family, and faithful women follow that lead. It's this quiet conditioning that will become explicit when she's older, but it's already being absorbed in childhood. So by the end of primary school, around the age of 11, an LDS girl has been taught that she is special and is loved by God, but also that she is on earth to fulfill a specific role in God's plan. And that plan invariably includes being a righteous wife and a mother one day. The Family Proclamation, an official 1995 church declaration often displayed in LDS homes, proclaims that marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God, and that the family is central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of His children. It further states, by divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and provide the necessities of life. Mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. So even as a little girl colors pictures of a temple or a happy family during primary school, she's imbibing this proclamation's message. Her highest calling in life will be motherhood, in partnership with a husband who is her leader. So before she even enters her teens, that mold is cast. A young Mormon girl knows that she is expected to be obedient, modest, virtuous, family-oriented, and future motherly. She's likely never seen a woman lead a congregation because all Mormon bishops are men, or even perform a priestly ritual because only men are able to bless communion or baptize. She's grown up singing about being a mother in Zion and listening to male leaders on the pulpit. But none of this is oppressive to her. It's simply normal in her community. But as she stands at the cusp of adolescence, the church's rules will soon explicitly govern her behavior in everything from clothing to dating. The gentle indoctrination of childhood is about to become a far more detailed checklist for how to live as a Latter-day Saint young woman. At age 12, Mormon children graduate from primary school and go into the youth programs. For girls, this means joining Young Women, a church-sponsored program just for female youth, while boys join a parallel Young Men program. Immediately, the church's expectations for female behavior are spelled out in detail. Each young woman receives a pamphlet called For the Strength of Youth, a sort of moral guidebook covering topics like dress and appearance, dating, sexual purity, media, language, and more. For decades, until very recently, this booklet was highly specific. It was essentially a list of do's and don'ts from the prophets. Every LDS teen could quote its standards. For example, the 2011 edition taught, quote, immodest clothing is any clothing that is tight, sheer, or revealing in any other manner. Young women should avoid shorts and short skirts, shirts that do not cover the stomach, and clothing that does not cover the shoulders or is low cut in the front or the back. Young men should also maintain modesty in their appearance. They should choose appropriately modest apparel when participating in sports. Okay. The fashions of the world will change, but the Lord's standards will not change. So this language makes it clear that girls carry a particular burden of modesty. An entire list of forbidden styles is directed at them, but boys only get a brief mention, and the dress code's emphasis is on female coverage. The message is that a good Mormon young woman is always modestly dressed, keeping her body essentially under wraps. Shoulders, cleavage, midriff, and above the knee thighs are off limits to display. The culture reinforces this vigorously. At church dances or BYU campus, a girl in a sleeveless sundress will likely be scolded or handed a cardigan. The subtext often communicated is that women's immodest dress can tempt or distract the men. The subtext often communicated is that women's immodest dress can tempt or distract men, so it's up to the girls to cover up. Now, notably, the church has tried to clarify that modesty is about showing respect for God and oneself, not about controlling others' thoughts. But in practice, many LDS girls internalize that they are responsible for not arousing boys. Because I guess men are just fragile that way and unable to control their urges. Sounds like a men problem to me. Now, dating rules are likewise ingrained by strength of youth. Historically, it advises no dating at all until age 16, and even then, teens should stick to casual group dates, not one-on-one steady dating in high school. Serious relationships and any kind of sexual experimentation are to be postponed until after missions or into the college years when marriage is a near-term prospect. A young Mormon woman learns that her teenage years are not for romance or exploration, but for preparing for an eventual temple marriage to a worthy returned missionary. In many LDS communities, teens who break the no dating rule or get too serious with the boyfriend face social disapproval and possibly a chat with the bishop. The idea is to protect youth from sexual temptation by keeping things structured and supervised. So, as we continue to explore this topic, this focus on chastity will seem extreme by broader societal standards, but it's entirely normal within the Mormon bubble. The law of chastity is, in fact, the paramount rule for LDS youth and adults. So simply put, it requires that no sexual relations outside the bonds of legal heterosexual marriage. For teens, that means no sex, period. And in practice, it also means no sexual touching, no passionate making out, and even no masturbation, though that word rarely appears in official materials. But the point is that young Mormons are taught to be sexually pure in thoughts, words, and actions. The Strength of Youth booklet, which is prior to a recent 2022 update, spells out that young Mormons are not to have any sexual relations before marriage and to be completely faithful to your spouse after marriage. It also warns against pornography and any media that arouses sexual emotions. Many church lessons for youth include object lessons equating chastity with personal worth. A notorious example is comparing a girl who's lost her virginity to a piece of chewed gum that no one would want. Yeah, imagine being like 13 years old and hearing this. So while not every congregation uses such a harsh analogy, the underlying teaching is that a girl's virtue, once lost, can never be fully regained. Though the church also preaches the atonement of Christ, that any sin can be forgiven, but the social stigma still remains. In 2009, church leaders even added virtue as a value in the Young Women's program, reinforcing that sexual purity is a core measure of a girl's spiritual standing. But of course, all teens are still out there soaking with their friends. And if you don't know what soaking is, should I tell you? Should I? Yeah. Okay, soaking is when a man just sticks it in and doesn't move because the movement is what is sex. So in order to get the bed to move, sometimes a friend separate from the couple will like bounce and jump on the bed. It's like a weird workaround. I guess penetration alone isn't considered sex. You know, I feel like I've never covered any single religion that has so many loopholes or people trying to find so many loopholes. But perhaps the most intrusive manifestation of this purity culture is the practice of one-on-one interviews with bishops about chastity. So starting in early adolescence, around 12, and then regularly, often annually, or whenever seeking participation in some sacred rites, every young LDS woman sits down privately with her male bishop for a worthiness interview. In these closed-door meetings, the church bishop asks a series of personal questions to determine if she is obeying church standards. This sounds absolutely traumatizing. I remember when my dad tried to give me the talk about breast development, and I was mortified. I was like, I want my mom to talk to me about this. Not my father, not some church bishop, not some random dude on the street. My mom. Thank you. Now, while the church handbook gives some broad guidelines, like ask if they obey the law of chastity, keep it simple. In practice, some bishops historically went into explicit detail. Many women have later reported being asked at ages as young as 12 or 13 about masturbation or other sexual encounters. Often these questions were so explicit that girls didn't even understand them. So this obviously led to a lot of confusion and shame. They are 12 and 13 years old. Now, this issue came to head in 2018 when a former bishop, Sam Young, led a public campaign called Protect LDS Children to end one-on-one sexually explicit interviews with minors. He gathered stories of trauma. One man recalled confessing masturbation as a child and being shamed and punished by losing his privilege to take communion, and this left him with an unhealthy attitude about intimacy to this day as an adult. Another mother recounted how her 12-year-old daughter didn't even know what chaste meant when the bishop quizzed her. And the bishop bluntly asked the child, "Are you having sex with a married man?" Which left the girl in tears. Hundreds of LDS women and men have described invasive, shaming interviews during youth that fixated on sexual transgressions, both great and small. Quote, "There is no limit whatsoever to the gross, sexually explicit questions," unquote, Sam Young observed of some clergy's conduct. In March 2018, hundreds marched to LDS headquarters in Salt Lake City, demanding an end to these private interviews. And the church responded by tweaking the policy. Now, a youth can request another adult to be present in the room, and leaders are instructed not to ask unnecessarily graphic questions. However, the fundamental practice remains. A teenage girl's most intimate morality is subject to examination by an older male church leader under the threat of losing privileges if she confesses to breaking rules. It's an experience virtually universal to LDS women, and one that reinforces just how important their sexual purity is in the eyes of the church. So consider what this means for a 15 or a 16-year-old Mormon young woman. While her non-LDS peers at school might be going out on casual dates, experimenting with first kisses, or grappling with sexual feelings as a normal part of growing up, she lives under intense pressure to remain pure. And if she slips up, maybe she and her steady boyfriend make out and it goes a little bit too far, perhaps touching under clothing, she faces a crisis of conscience. Should she confess to the bishop? If she does, there might be consequences. She could be deemed unworthy for a time, which would mean that she wasn't allowed to take sacrament at church, or she might be barred from activities like temple baptisms. Some bishops might handle it kindly, emphasizing repentance and self-forgiveness, but others might grill her for every detail of the encounter and make her feel dirty. Many LDS women later recount that their sexual experiences as teenagers, even relatively innocent ones, became sources of deep shame because of the way the church framed any lapse as a serious sin. So one can kind of see how the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives cast, now in their some early 20s, came out of this. A few short years after likely pledging virginity through high school, some of them swung to the absolute opposite extreme of partner swapping. The swing can be understood as a reaction to repression When normal sexual development is stigmatized, it may manifest later in unhealthy, secretive ways. Not to say that swinging is unhealthy as long as everyone's consenting in the room, but there are several other examples of unhealthy relationships with sex. So, just as an example to break it down a little bit further, the MomTok influencer Taylor Frankie Paul, who was married at only 21 as a virgin, was trading spouses by 28. So this is a drastic flip from those Mormon norms that speak to possible whiplash between repression and rebellion. So beyond chastity and modesty, the Teenage Mormon Girl's Rulebook covers other lifestyle choices too. She is taught to avoid alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea entirely. This is the LDS Health Code, or Word of Wisdom, that prohibits those substances for all ages. So while high school culture elsewhere might include partying, for her it's a firm no. She likely steers clear of school dances if they seem too rowdy, and instead, the church organizes its own chaperoned youth dances where dress code and conduct are enforced. No strapless dresses and no dirty dancing. Her media consumption is totally policed. No R-rated movies, nor pornography, and music and internet should be wholesome. Many LDS parents install filters or closely monitor their teens' online activity to ensure compliance with these rules. Even language is regulated. Swearing or taking the Lord's name in vain is strongly discouraged. Instead of saying, "oh my God," in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, they'll say something like, "oh my hell, oh my hell." It's like the funniest. I don't know. When I first heard it, I had to rewind, "oh my hell." Okay. So all these expectations are laid out plainly in church publications and lessons. For the Strength of the Youth, or FSY, was essentially a compact Mormon teen code of conduct. The consistency of these standards is often noted by members. Wherever an LDS girl lives, be it Utah or Georgia or Brazil, she is held to the same rules, creating a sense of communal identity. So it can kind of be comforting to belong to a community with very clear standards. Many Mormon young women embrace these rules, seeing them as divine protection. They feel that dressing modestly and abstaining from sex and substances sets them apart in a good way from the rest of the world. Well, I was about to make a joke about how big and scary the world is, but it is kind of right now. But a common refrain in youth talks is that LDS youth should be a peculiar people and stand out for their purity and goodness. However, not all experiences are rosy. Some girls feel extreme guilt and pressure. For instance, a teenage girl struggling with normal masturbation, an act that is never explicitly mentioned in scriptures but is condemned by some church leaders, might feel like she's alone in sin and unworthy of God's love. And if she confesses to her bishop, she's met with a stern response. And she might internalize deep shame about her body and sexuality. Similarly, girls whose bodies don't fit the Mormon mold, so if they're a little more curvier, that might draw more attention even if they were wearing modest clothes, those women can feel singled out. There are reports of LDS girls being sent home from church dances for a dress deemed too tight or given oversized t-shirts at church-sponsored camps because their clothing was judged immodest. Now, this kind of body shaming under the guise of modesty can certainly damage a young woman's self-image. A recent large study by BYU professors found a paradox. Religious involvement usually correlates with better body image. Yet, Utah, with its LDS majority, has sky-high rates of cosmetic surgery among women. In their survey, 14% of Latter-day Saint respondents reported having major cosmetic surgery, such as breast augmentations or tummy tucks, compared to 4% of Americans nationally. The researchers attributed this in part to a perfection culture in Mormonism, women feeling that they must appear perfect to be seen as righteous. One respondent admitted to, quote, appearing to be a perfect, worthy, righteous member of the LDS means looking the part as well, unquote. So even as teenagers, LDS girls are told that their body is a temple of God, not to be defiled by drugs or promiscuity. They also absorb intense pressures about appearance. They need to be slim, attractive, but not too sexy. They need to be eternally youthful, the perfect wife. And it's no wonder that Utah actually leads the nation in antidepressant use. In fact, a landmark study in the early 2000s found that antidepressants were prescribed in Utah at nearly twice the national average. A finding so striking that even local doctors claimed it was cultural causes. One psychiatrist noted that Mormon women tend to wear this, "Yes, I'm happy" mask. They feel compelled to pretend constantly, explaining that Mormon women are expected to be unfailingly cheerful and capable, which can drive them to hide pain and then medicate their unhappiness. He called it the Mother of Zion syndrome. She's the woman with 8 kids, a flawless home, and a constant smile. At least on the outside. The same perfectionism that's fueling Prozac prescriptions may also fuel some women to get that mommy makeover plastic surgery after bearing children, just to try to maintain the image of the ideal Mormon wife. And we see this so much in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. On one hand, I really appreciate the women's transparency regarding all of the work that they have gotten done. But I always have had the belief that plastic surgery, any type of cosmetic procedure, should be one that makes you feel better about yourself, not one that makes you feel like you'll be more acceptable to other people, whether it's the male gaze or whatever it is. And it sounds like with this context of Mormon women being forced to be the perfect picture of perfectionism, that makes me understand why there is so much drive and push and pull towards plastic surgery. One of the women in the TV show got this vaginal reconstruction surgery, which was a big topic of conversation. And I think on one hand, the transparency is great. When you have children, things are going to change down there. But the idea that a woman still can't be as beautiful and sexy and as enjoyable to have a special intimate moment with simply because they've had children, and their body will change just because they've done something so phenomenal and difficult, it makes me really sad for them. Because I would hope that every woman finds a partner that appreciates how their body changes after they've brought life into the world. Our bodies are going to constantly be changing. And it's frustrating societally, just whether you're Mormon or not, that women are held to this standard way, 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 way more than men are. So the added pressure within the Mormon Church just creates like that pressure cooker, really, of being perfect all the time and looking young all the time, especially when there's this subculture of Mormonism where older men, I'm talking geriatric men, are getting child brides assigned to them. This obsession with youth feels so disgusting and predatory. Now, for Mormon girls in their teens, these dynamics are just beginning to manifest. They diligently follow the rules. They are, by and large, controlled in almost every aspect of their behavior compared to boys and their non-LDS peers. And they participate in their own self-policing too. On Mormon social media circles, like the predecessors of MomTok among teens, you'll find girls posting modest fashion tips or proudly announcing that they took a chastity pledge. It's a community that reinforces itself. A Vulture review of Mormon Wives noted how the MomTok women's, quote, ridiculous self-policing performance of belonging had parallels in the aesthetic scriptures of tradwifery or, Mormonism, unquote. So in other words, the habit of monitoring and correcting each other to fit an ideal, whether it's matching pastel athleisure sets on TikTok or making sure each other's skirts are long enough at church, is ingrained from the Mormon culture of exacting standards. And we see this in almost every episode of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Everyone is so preoccupied with each other and how they're living their life. And it's all either under this like facade of, I care for her and that's why I'm being harsh, but also being incredibly, incredibly judgmental and not offering any grace for each other. It's like one mistake means that you're sinning, you're a terrible person, you're a terrible friend. When honestly, people just make mistakes and it might have absolutely nothing to do with you. It might not be personal at all. But the women are obsessed with holding each other accountable and trying to figure out who's lying and trying to ensure that they are all living this new perfect example of what MomTok should be. It's like they're leaving one cult and trying to create a new one, but there's just no real leader and there's cliques all within it because everybody is just fighting and arguing, probably for screen time, honestly. Now, one more formative experience for many LDS girls around age 16 to 18 is the decision of whether or not to serve a mission. For generations, Mormon missions, or proselytizing for 2 years, typically abroad, were almost compulsory for young men at 19, but optional for young women who had to be 21 in the past. But now 19-year-old women can go for it as well because they're just as mature as their male counterparts, they decided recently. Now, culturally, a young Mormon man who did not serve a mission was stigmatized. For women, serving a mission was seen as praiseworthy but was not expected. Their mission was to get married and have children. Yeah. As someone who thought she'd never get married and is child-free by choice, I just can't even wrap my brain around it. Now, in the last decade, more LDS young women do choose to serve 18-month missions at 19, especially since the age change in 2012. On a mission, rules are even stricter, if that's possible. Missionaries follow a rigorous daily schedule. They dress very conservatively. Sister missionaries wear long skirts and high necklines and only one modest pair of earrings. The mission rulebook covers this attire in detail. And also, they are never allowed to be alone with a member of the opposite sex. Those who go through this come back extremely indoctrinated into obedience and modesty. I mean, it has been drilled into them 24/7 for 18 months. But it also often comes with new confidence and new skills. However, many LDS women still do not serve missions, and instead they focus on college or getting married by the age of 20. Because if you're not married by 20, you're just like old chewing gum, right? Those who don't go aren't judged harshly. In fact, within the faith, a woman is sometimes subtly discouraged from a mission if she has the opportunity to marry a good LDS man in that time frame. I mean, this nuance, again, emphasizes that ultimately a woman's highest achievement is marriage in the temple, which will bind you to your husband in eternity. It means that if you die, you will go to the afterlife with your husband. And if you get divorced, you have to formally, spiritually unseal that marriage. And if you don't, and you have children with that person, and say the woman leaves the church, the man and the son or the child would go to heaven and you would just be floating around in hell for eternity, never seeing your child again. Wild. But this also means that the highest level of achievement for an LDS woman is marriage and rearing a family. It is not a career and it is not independent life. By the time a young Mormon woman turns 18, she has lived under the church's comprehensive rule book throughout her teens. If she has conformed well, she likely has a reputation as a Molly Mormon, a term that is sometimes used endearingly, but sometimes mockingly, for the quintessential LDS good girl who does everything right. She'll graduate seminary, a 4-year program of daily scripture study class, and perhaps earn her Young Womanhood Recognition Award. It's similar to the Eagle Scouts, and it requires goals in faith, personal integrity, etc. And of course, she will remain a virgin who's never even tasted alcohol or coffee. So, this is a remarkable level of control for any religion to maintain over its youth in modern society. Now, many do maintain it, but others quietly slip up and repent in the bishop's office, or some just hide those transgressions out of fear. When the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives cast members in their mid-20s confessed to never having done things like drink a cocktail before, until their post-scandal rebellion, of course, it's entirely believable given this upbringing. So as she enters adulthood, an LDS woman faces the next set of expectations: to find a righteous husband, marry in the temple, and start having children, all while continuing to live church's standards. A joking phrase in Mormon vernacular is the MRS degree, referring to women ostensibly going to college chiefly to land a Mr. and become a Mrs. As one Mormon feminist wryly noted, quote, "There are the running jokes about women at BYU leaving with not a BA or a BS, but with the coveted and desirable MRS, and the cultural idea that if you graduate without the MRS, a woman is nearly doomed to spinsterhood." Yeah. Now, this was much more true in past decades, but traces of it still persist. For example, Brigham Young University in Provo, the flagship LDS university, has anecdotally high marriage rates. Many women marry during undergrad, and some leave school early once they are married or once they're pregnant with their first child. Quote, "ring by spring," or getting engaged by spring semester of freshman year, is a known phenomenon at BYU. While BYU women today are graduating at a higher rate than in the past, the push to marry young and not delay childbearing is still very strong. Kate Kelly, the ex-LDS activist, observed that in her generation, the point of Mormon women going to college is to find a spouse, period. Though active church members might contest that as an exaggeration, it captures a real pressure that is felt by many. LDS leaders constantly extol marriage and warn against pushing it off. The late church president, Gordon B. Hinckley, encouraged young adults to not waste time in singlehood. More starkingly, Prophet Ezra Taft Benson taught that young adults should not postpone marriage and children for worldly goals. Quote, "Do not delay having children. Do not use the reasoning of the world. We'll wait till we can afford it, till school is done, till we have a house. That is not pleasing to God. Mothers who enjoy good health, have your children and have them early. Do not curtail the number of your children for personal or selfish reasons. In the eternal perspective, children, not possessions, not position, are our greatest jewels," unquote. I believe that this is in effort to maintain control over women, to maintain their information control, how educated they are, their behavioral control, because if they have the responsibility of rearing children, they will likely do little else, and to maintain that purity culture. It's basically effectively to keep them in the church, to keep them within this structure, and to isolate them so much so that the church can grow from within instead of having to recruit like so many other cults do. This is a stark contrast to other cults that we've explored on this channel. A lot of other cults discourage children or have even had parents abandon their children or have forced abortions of children because they thought that having children would distract from the mission within the cult, which effectively meant that if a woman in the cult was preoccupied by raising children, she wouldn't be as easily manipulated into becoming intimate with the leader, or all of the financial resources that would be used to raising children would then be funneled into the cult. But I think that since Mormonism has had such a terrible reputation, but has experienced such longevity in its history, I mean, it's been around for almost 100 years at this point, and it's not widespread, mainstream considered to be a cult. But it is. And I think part of the strategic effort to not be labeled a cult by recruitment, they just encourage people to have as many children as possible to get closer to God or claim their place in heaven. But what they're really doing is trying to increase the longevity of this religion, this cult from within. If you have 10 children and you're indoctrinating them all from an early age, it might not matter if a few hundred leave every year because you're rearing thousands of children within this structured religion or cult, and there's just no escape from it. That's just my tangential theory. Now, marriage and motherhood is considered to be a destiny that is foreordained and rigorously enforced. When a Mormon woman in her late teens or early 20s does get engaged, it's almost always expected that she will marry in an LDS temple. The temple wedding, called a sealing, is a sacred ordinance where the couple is married not just until death do you part, but for eternity. And it's essential in LDS theology for exaltation or the highest level of salvation. However, in order to enter the temple, one must have a temple recommendation or a card that's given only after an interview with the bishop and a higher leader to certify one's worthiness. So for a young woman, this means that by her wedding day, she must be found in full compliance with the church rules. She must be a virgin. She must pay a full tithe or 10% of all her income, and she must abide by the word of wisdom, so not have any coffee, tea, or alcohol, and also sustain the church leadership and generally living all of the commandments. If she has had any sexual transgressions, she must confess them and resolve them well before the wedding to be considered clean enough for the temple. Now, couples who mess up and have premarital sex often face postponement of a temple wedding or even formal church discipline. So this social pressure to marry pure is immense. Many devout couples may even rush their engagements to avoid that temptation, so they might prefer a quick wedding over a longer engagement that might make abstinence difficult. The temple endowment ceremony, which a woman typically goes through for the first time a week or so before her wedding or before she serves a mission, if she does so, is a deeply formative spiritual experience and is also one that historically reinforces that gender hierarchy. In the ritual, which involves making covenants to God while dressed in symbolic white robes, women would make a promise to hearken unto the counsel of their husbands. It was essentially a vow to obey their husband's guidance as he obeys God. And men, in contrast, covenanted to obey God directly. So this clearly signaled that the husband would be the spiritual leader and mediator for his wife. However, in 2019, the church revised the endowment ceremony to eliminate this unequal wording so that now women and men make the same covenants to God. LDS feminists did rejoice at this change, calling it a leap forward toward equality. But still, decades of women went through the old ceremony, and the older generations internalized that patriarchal pattern as God's law. And they probably passed it down through their children. Now, additionally, in a traditional Mormon temple marriage theology, the husband is seen as a priesthood holder who, in eternity, could preside over multiple wives, whereas a woman is sealed to just one husband. Now, this comes from the church's polygamous roots. Though Mormons today monogamously marry one spouse, the doctrine hasn't fully repudiated polygamy in the afterlife. So, for instance, if an LDS man is widowed or divorced and then remarried and sealed in the temple to a second wife, he can be sealed to both women and effectively have two eternal wives. And a living woman, by contrast, cannot be sealed to two men. She would need to cancel her first sealing to be sealed to another if divorced, or wait until death to be sealed to multiple subsequent spouses. I touched on this a little bit earlier in another tangent, but why, even in the afterlife, are women not held to the same standard as men? It just doesn't make sense. And all of this results in what author Carol Lynn Pearson termed eternal polygamy, a lingering belief that in heaven a righteous man might have several wives, but a woman can only have one husband. Doesn't sound fair to me. No wonder these girls are soft swinging. I mean, come on. Sorry. Even though plural marriage hasn't been sanctioned by the church in well over a century, its legacy has endured painfully in our sealing policies, writes columnist Jana Reese. The effect on women can be subtle but real. Some LDS widows, for example, feel they shouldn't remarry because they are already sealed to their late husband and can't be sealed to a new one, whereas widowers freely marry again and just expect to have two eternal companions. In another layer of inequality, quietly reminding women that the eternal structure favors male authority and multiplicity. Now, on the wedding day itself, Mormon brides often face a tough choice. Temple weddings are only open to LDS members in good standing, so non-Mormon family or less active family cannot attend. Many faithful women ache over excluding parents or siblings who aren't LDS from their ceremony, but the church offers little flexibility, except if you're waiting a year after a civil marriage to do a temple sealing, but that's discouraged and it carries its own stigma within LDS culture. So a Mormon woman often complies even if it hurts family feelings, which is a testament to how deeply ingrained the obedience is. Now, once married for time and eternity, a Mormon woman embarks on the life the church has been preparing her for all along. And here is where the rulebook for women's roles truly comes into play. The LDS Church is explicitly patriarchal in family governance. Official doctrine states that fathers are to preside and mothers are primarily responsible for nurture, as cited earlier. In practical terms, within a Mormon marriage, the husband is expected to take ultimate responsibility for the family's spiritual and temporal welfare, acting as the head of the household. A popular LDS teaching is that the father should lead family prayers, scripture study, and priesthood blessings, or laying hands on family members to give comfort or guidance, or even do a baby blessing, as we saw in the first season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, where only the men could gather around the baby to touch the baby and give them a blessing, and the mothers were just like, oh, that's nice. No, I will bless my own child, thank you. The wife has a say and is considered to be an equal partner per the family proclamation, but this is a very delicate dance. She's equal often in feeling, while presiding implies the final word or leadership responsibility held by the husband. Many Mormon couples interpret this harmoniously. They make decisions jointly, but if a tough call arises, say moving for a job or a calling, the husband's role is to seek God's will and lead, and the wife's role is to support that decision almost without question. More traditional couples take it even further, with wives deferring almost entirely to husbands on major decisions. What about working outside the home? Well, here the church's stance has evolved in tone, but not entirely in substance. In the mid to late 20th century, leaders were adamant that a woman's place was in the home. Ezra Taft Benson's 1987 address to the mothers in Zion bluntly declared, contrary to conventional wisdom, a mother's calling is in the home, not in the marketplace. Okay. He reminded women that the Lord's command to Adam in Genesis was to earn bread by the sweat of his brow, not Eve, implying that women are divinely designed to be homemakers. This is the divine right of a wife and mother, Benson said. With her claim on their husbands for financial support, the counsel of the church has always been for mothers to spend their full time in the home, in rearing and caring for the children. He did acknowledge exceptions, widows or single moms, or extreme circumstances, but stressed that these are the exception, not the rule. And his words carried prophetic weight. And for a long time, LDS culture treated employed mothers almost as pitiful at best or selfish at worst. Young women were encouraged to get education in case they needed to work or to enrich their motherhood, but not to prioritize a career. So a common pattern emerged. A Mormon woman might attend college, even graduate school, but once kids arrive, she would be expected to quit her job and stay at home. Even today, in many LDS communities, it's rare to see a mother of young children who works full-time unless financial need absolutely demands it. Women who do have careers often face whispers questioning if they're neglecting their kids or pursuing worldly ambitions over family. The pressure to conform is huge. Recall the blog expert we saw, where a woman recounts people telling her she'd have a harder time finding a husband if she went to grad school, or that she might be taking a spot from a man who needed to support a family. Can you imagine that pressure? I mean, such comments show the lingering attitude. A highly educated, career-oriented woman may be viewed as deviating from her true role. And we have seen this in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I mean, I will give it to these women. They are definitely taking a hard left from the church because due to their following, they are all making a lot of money. And I think each of them is the breadwinner for their family. And we really do see some of the implications and the ways that different couples are trying to deal with that structural change within the home. There's one couple, Jen and her husband Zach, that got a lot of heat after the first season because he is very, very much the typical Mormon man who wants to be in charge and doesn't give his wife any grace. And she is becoming the breadwinner, and he obviously doesn't know how to handle it because he wants to be the doctor. He wants to be the one bringing in all of this money. But it's very, very clear that Jen has become the breadwinner. And because of that, she's feeling more empowered and tries to step into more of a leadership role within the home. And it becomes very, very clear that Zach has started to use tactics to try to put her down or maintain his control within the family structure. A lot of people, both from the first and the second season, find him to be narcissistic and manipulative and controlling. And there is some concerning language that Jen uses where she will say, he treats me this way and yells at me and verbally abuses me and wants to control me because he loves me so much. It's just the way he shows his love. And I think if you've watched this channel long enough, or you've honestly watched any true crime or are curious about psychology, you will see that this is one of the classic things a woman in a dangerous relationship says. Well, that's just how he shows my love. He just loves me so much and doesn't know how to channel that love for me sometimes. It is inherently dangerous. We also see him using this tactic of triangulation with Jen to try to further isolate her. Triangulation is when a narcissist or an abuser pulls in a third party to try to reinforce their belief. They're basically manipulating that third party into turning against their victim. And in the first season, he got a lot of backlash, and Jen was definitely portrayed as a potential victim in their marriage. And then in the second season, we see her stepping into her own a little bit. But then we have this strange interaction between her husband and two other players, Demi and Jesse. And he essentially says that Jen has been lying to them. And that creates basically this big blow up where these three best friends now hate each other. So Demi and Jesse end up turning against Jen. And it's a classic example of this show, the women being a little bit misguided in their understanding of feminism and supporting other women, because I think if they were truly understanding the methods of something like Darvo or manipulation, or they truly understood these abusive tactics that are propped up as, oh, that's just a man leading in the Mormon Church, listen to the man, do what the man say. I think it's still so deeply ingrained in them that they're not able to recognize the tactics that Zach is using in order to continue to control his wife and pull his wife out of that group, despite the fact that it makes them a lot of money. Let me know what you think. We're getting into reality TV theory territory here, but I do want to mention, just to be fair, that the church has in recent years softened its tone regarding women working. Leaders will now occasionally say, we honor women who pursue education and work, and they acknowledge the economic realities that sometimes require dual incomes. But the idea held up in sermons and in LDS media is still the stay-at-home mother devoted to her brood. Many Mormon women embrace that role joyfully. They truly want to be mothers and are happy that the church supports that choice, and that is fantastic. This isn't a debate on whether that's what all women should do or not. I believe each woman should determine on her own, freely, how she wants to live her life. But some women within the LDS church do feel stunted. If a woman has talents and ambitions outside domestic life, she might feel guilty. Some quietly pursue side businesses from home, just like MLMs, which are very popular among Mormon moms, partly because they promise flexibility and they don't necessarily violate the stay-at-home expectation. It's just another way MLMs prey upon vulnerable women. But others have just put their dreams on hold for decades. The cost can be also financial dependency and loss of identity beyond being a mom. I mean, if you are an uneducated woman who happens to get divorced and you've never been considered a leader, you don't have the education to get a job that will pay for the lifestyle you've become accustomed to, you could be in a very, very difficult situation. One LDS mother, after years at home, wrote of realizing that she had, quote, been dependent on someone else my entire mothering life, and it creates an imbalance that I wasn't even aware of, unquote. Upon finally earning her own paycheck, she felt a subtle but powerful shift from being someone in need to someone who chooses. Her reflection suggests that full economic dependence, encouraged by the church as an ideal, can diminish a woman's sense of agency without her even noticing until that has changed. Motherhood itself, of course, is highly valorized in Mormonism. Church leaders routinely proclaim motherhood is the highest, holiest service assumed by humankind, and that mothers are co-creators with God in bringing spirits to earth. This praise is sincere, ? But it also puts mothers on a pedestal that can kind of feel confining. Mothers are supposed to be self-sacrificing, tirelessly nurturing, spiritually strong, and impeccably loving. If a Mormon mom feels overwhelmed or depressed, she might hesitate to seek help because of the expectation that she should be rejoicing in her divine role. And oftentimes, these Mormons who do seek out therapy, they're going to a Mormon-affiliated therapist. There was, not to bring up something incredibly tragic, but Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt, they created a Mormon family therapy session that became inherently abusive. Additionally, Utah's high antidepressant use among women was partly attributed by experts to this exact pressure. You're supposed to be perfect because Sister Smith across the street can do it with 3 more kids than you, and her hair is always in place. So if you're not happy, you're failing. And that's a direct quote. Many LDS women privately struggle under the weight of trying to be the perfect wife and perfect mother. It's a struggle that the secret lives of Mormon wives hints at behind those Instagram smiles. And there's also a clear expectation of fertility. LDS couples are commanded to multiply and replenish the earth, and large families are common. A Mormon wife who intentionally delays or limits childbearing might face probing questions or gentle chastisement. Birth control is officially allowed by the church, seen as a personal decision between a couple and God, but older teachings lingering in collective memory discourage artificial birth control. Certainly, if a young couple has been married a couple years with no children, the ward members start to gossip or pry. Infertile women often suffer in silence or face insensitive remarks about how in the next life they'll be mothers. Motherhood is seen as an eternal attribute, not just a life choice. A woman who does not have children by either circumstance or choice can feel out of place in LDS female society, where so much revolves around parenting. Now, in the day-to-day life of an adult LDS woman, there are numerous other rules and norms dictating behavior. As for dress and grooming, once a woman goes through the temple, she begins wearing the temple garment, a set of sacred underwear that resembles a cap sleeve undershirt and knee-length shorts, which she is instructed to wear day and night throughout her life as a reminder of her covenants. Imagine wearing that under your clothes every single day of your life, in the heat, at home, just all of the time. We see Jen in the show kind of panic when she goes on a girls' trip and forgets her garments. The church's handbook also explicitly says, quote, "You should wear the garment day and night throughout your life. The garment should be worn beneath the outer clothing. Members should not modify or alter the garment to accommodate different styles of clothing." So in other words, faithful endowed women must keep their garments on nearly always, removing them only for activities like showering, swimming, or intimacy, and even them putting them right back on immediately after. The garment serves both as spiritual protection and as a built-in dress code. Because it covers shoulders, midriff, back, and down to the knee, it effectively forces LDS women's wardrobe into modest guidelines. If you wear your garment, you simply cannot wear a sundress with spaghetti straps or short shorts because the garment would show, and this is considered improper. Or you would have to take off your garment, which is also considered wrong. So thus, Mormon women often have to buy specific wedding dresses with sleeves, they swim in longer swimwear or wear a t-shirt over a swimsuit, and they endure Utah's hot summers in extra layers because the garment is non-negotiable. Some find deep meaning in this constant wearing of a sacred symbol, but others quietly resent it as uncomfortable or limiting. In the body image study mentioned earlier, 30% of LDS women said wearing the garment negatively affected their body image, making them feel frumpy or unattractive. But few will openly defy the garment rule. Doing so would immediately mark you as less devout. To the outside world, a sleeved, modestly dressed woman in Salt Lake City might just seem conservative. Within Mormonism, fellow members can often tell if someone is wearing their garments or deliberately not wearing them. And not wearing them without a serious reason is akin to breaking covenants. So it's a daily bodily restriction that LDS women are forced to accept. As one church source put it, quote, "Faithfully wearing the temple garment represents a continuing commitment, a sacred privilege, and an outward expression of inner commitment." And the General Handbook urges members, quote, "not to find occasions to remove the garment." This is control at the most literal level. The religion dictates even one's underwear and, by extension, one's fashion choices 24/7. However, many women are striving to improve things from within. There is a cohort of faithful LDS feminists who gently push for changes, like allowing women to be witnesses or achieved and giving women more visible roles, or simply improving the rhetoric around women. For instance, focusing modesty teachings on personal dignity rather than objectify women. Some progress is noted. The fact that the church media in recent years has profiled women in STEM careers or portrayed working mothers more often shows a very slow cultural shift. But the fundamental doctrines, male priesthood, mother in the home, those are all still in place. For the church to change, those would require revelations of the kind that ended polygamy or opened priesthood to Black members, seismic shifts that are not necessarily easily triggered. And in the meantime, we have Swingergate. Mormon women really are trying to navigate it the best they can. Women are creating supportive networks like unofficial Facebook groups where LDS moms can candidly discuss mental health or marital issues, things that they might not feel safe voicing at the church. They develop a skill for smiling through the pain. And the MomTok phenomenon itself was like a microcosm. These women bonded over sharing lifestyle content, but they kept their distress, failing marriages, boredom, and identity loss hidden behind dance videos until the reality show came out. This reality show finally allowed them to voice some of their raw feelings. One cast member says in the trailer that we want to get to the raw things we're going through and show different aspects of Mormon life. And this suggests that behind that curated perfection, they knew that there were raw struggles worth telling. And indeed, audiences have been drawn to the show not just for the scandal, but for the peek at the tension of being an influencer who must balance public image, religious expectations, and the demands of family life, as the series overview states. Religious expectations are arguably the heaviest burden in that triad. To be a good Mormon wife, these women felt that they had to follow the rule book while also being modern women in a social age, which is a tough balancing act. They perform an ongoing, careful dance of adherence and independence from Mormonism. They try to project empowerment, yet remain within the bounds of their faith. And this paradox, wanting some autonomy but not to cross the line, might even explain why the MomTok group set rules for their illicit swinging. They agreed to not have full intercourse with each other, for example. So even in rebellion, they're creating boundaries, perhaps to convince themselves that they weren't really breaking the core law of chastity, but it backfired spectacularly. Now, the church will say and has said that the MomTok wives case is an outlier and that Mormon women as a whole are happy and flourishing under the gospel. It is true that many LDS women report high life satisfaction tied to strong community and family bonds. But the narrative that the church prefers is that Latter-day Saints women are empowered in their divine roles, not oppressed. They're empowered because they're moms, you guys. That's what makes them empowered. They're empowered because they've decided for themselves to listen to their husband. They definitely weren't indoctrinated via a cult from the time they were born. Definitely not. All of that to say that the line between honoring women and actually giving them equal authority is one the church is unwilling to cross. Women are revered as mothers, but denied the decision-making power and religious authority that men have. And this is the crux of the control. Reverence can be a subtle cage. When someone is told they're so sacred and special and that their role is different and conveniently subordinate, it can mask the inequality. Some LDS women might not mind this, but others eventually do. The cumulative effect of all these rules and structures is that Mormon women's lives are orchestrated in almost every dimension by their religion's prescriptions, from their garments on their skin to the number of children they have, from what substance may pass their lips to what media enters their mind, from how they spend each Sunday to what they do on weekdays. The church is omnipresent. For a devout woman, her identity as a daughter of God, wife of X, mother of Y, sister in Zion, Relief Society member, it's all encompassing. Maybe for some women it's beautiful and enriching, but it can also be smothering and leaves little room for personal autonomy or divergence. And when that balance tips towards smothering, we see outcomes like what has surfaced in various forms. We see MomTok's collapse, Utah's Prozac leadership, secret cosmetic surgeries, feminist insurgencies, or quiet departures. Each is a reaction to the same root issue: control, whether one labels it benevolent guidance or oppressive restriction. The rules that Mormon women live by is, by form, a double-edged sword. On one hand, they offer a clear blueprint for a life centered on faith, family, and service. And these are values that many women cherish. The structure can be comforting. You always know what is expected, and you become part of a tight-knit sisterhood of fellow LDS women striving for the same ideals. Many LDS women say that living the gospel standards has protected them from pitfalls like teen pregnancy, addiction, or even the hollow emptiness they perceive in more materialistic lifestyles. There might be a genuine empowerment in aspects of this type of womanhood, strong teachings on women's divine worth. However, women in LDS are expected to conform and to be completely obedient to a male-defined code, which inevitably curtails all personal freedom. And the MomTok wives found that out dramatically and publicly. They had lived that normative life and it just wasn't enough. So they tested the boundaries and faced very harsh consequences, both socially and personally. But now they all make tons of money, so I'm sure they're happy. Not that money brings everyone happiness, but they know what they're doing, that's for sure. Their stories resonated precisely because many LDS women know, if not the specifics, the feeling or yearning for something beyond the narrow line that's been drawn for them. Not every Mormon woman will break the rules, but almost all have had to make peace with them, either by embracing them fully, negotiating a compromise, or by pushing back. A mainstream LDS woman from childhood to marriage to maturity is one of the most guided and monitored demographic groups in America. She grows up reciting that she will stand as a witness of God at all times and is reminded that her behavior reflects on the church. She abides by a modest dress code stricter than virtually any other Christian group. She forgoes ordinary teenage experimentation under threat of spiritual peril. She marries usually within the faith because marrying a non-member is strongly discouraged. Once married, she is expected to become a mother, even if it means economic struggle or sacrificing other goals. Or her health. She is told, in effect, you can do anything, but most importantly, be a wife and mother. That comes first. This can create cognitive dissonance, as one LDS blogger put it. Yes, we are to be educated, but not too educated. Yes, we are to be educated, but we also simply must get married young and have babies quickly. As she noted, Utah has the largest gender gap in college graduates in the nation, meaning that far fewer women finish degrees compared to men. And there's a high rate of young mothers who, if divorce happens, find themselves underprepared to support themselves. And that gap isn't because LDS women lack the ability. It's a byproduct of the culture prioritizing early marriage and kids over completing education or starting careers. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives show, despite being dismissed by the church as not representative, actually highlights through its sensationalism just how high stakes living the Mormon dream is for women. When those women deviated from the rules, it was as if their entire world, marriages, friendships, community standing, disintegrated overnight. They were left to rebuild their identities in the public eye, grappling with guilt, judgment, and liberation all at once. In one scene, a cast member tearfully says, "I'm just trying to protect MomTok." And a critic noted that what she really meant was that she's trying to protect the illusion and community code that they had built. MomTok, in that sense, was an extended church-like community where they had rules and an image. But once broken, they realized that there wasn't much real substance to that community. It was held together by performance and pretense. And similarly, some LDS women who leave the church later reflect that relationships they thought were genuine were partly conditional on shared faith and adherence. Once they left, they felt an abrupt distance from LDS friends. The sisterhood sometimes proves fragile if one steps just a little bit outside the expected path. So what do you guys think of all of this? Have you watched Secret Lives of Mormon Wives? Did it, like it did for me, like start waving any red flags in your minds? Did you just become more and more curious? In my research for this video, I discovered that there was and has been a very large feminist movement within the LDS church that and these women do want to change the infrastructure as the church as a whole. So I think I might make a video. It'll probably be shorter. Hopefully this video is like an hour and a half long, but it will highlight the efforts and some of the successes that LDS women have had within the church. But in my opinion, I feel like the patriarchal structure and the misogyny has been so ingrained in Mormon culture for so long. It's become so internalized that I think it's difficult for a lot of members, especially members who grew up within the church. I believe it's very, very difficult for people to really, truly recognize all of the ways in which they've been oppressed. And sometimes I think, not that I would encourage anyone, well, I'm back and forth because on one hand, I'm like, it's a cult, get out of it. On the other hand, I'm like, you have the freedom to believe what you want. I would encourage any woman specifically, since that's who we're talking about, to leave the Mormon Church. It is, in my opinion, a cult, and it's considered to be the largest cult in the world by cult experts. So there's really only so much change in a cult that can happen without there being some kind of severe backlash. And I think the only reason certain changes have been made is because there's so much mainstream attention on the church itself. So the entire system would have to collapse and restructure for real change to be made, because that inherent patriarchal structure will always remain. It's just a part of the DNA. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for your support on this channel. Let me know what you think of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. It's bad. I just can't seem to get enough of it. I just can't. The reunion is this week, and I am excited. I'm ready. Also, I'm really excited. There is a cult education conference I'm going to soon. I'm thinking I might try to like vlog it, but I feel like a vlog is so much different than what I do on this channel. So I don't know if I would make it just like a private video, and if you want the link, I can send it, or I should just post it on the channel. If you've ever been to a work conference, I feel like it's probably going to be like that. It's a lot of like seminars, but I'm excited to bring more knowledge and education to the channel, because I just want to educate myself better on, cult dynamics and everything. So if you want to hear more about that, I definitely will share what I've learned, but I'm hoping that all the things I learn will start filtering into the videos so I can provide more education and awareness. But if you want to vlog, if you like that kind of content, just let me know. And anyways, guys, I hope you're having a wonderful, safe, positive weekend. Really take care of each other. I know it's really scary out there in the world, but just hold all the people you love close to you. And remember that you're valuable, you are important, and you deserve to have the freedom to make all of your own decisions. So please stay safe out there. Always ask questions and always stay skeptical. I'll see you in my next video very soon. Thank you so much.